My mother stood at the kitchen doorway, her voice sharp as a knife. "Get out, and don't ever come back." Those words cut through the air like a cold pair of scissors. I was 17. My hand froze mid-air, the plate still trembling on the table as the only response to the heavy silence enveloping the room. Even the old fireplace seemed to stop its creaking, as if the house itself was holding its breath. But my story doesn't begin at that moment. To understand why a teenage girl barely out of high school was kicked out of her own home by her mother with just a suitcase and $200 in her account, you have to go back in time. Back to the gray house with faded wooden walls and a rusty mailbox on Cherry Street, Denver, Colorado. My name is Isabel Blackwood, and this isn't just the story of how I built a tech company worth tens of millions of dollars. It's a story about silent wounds, suffocating expectations, and how I learned to step out of the mold others had cast for me. That house wasn't anything special. A 2-story old-fashioned home painted gray with creaky windows that rattled in strong winds. The lawn was always a bit too long, the wooden fence slightly crooked. But to me, it was an entire world. A world where I grew up, where every bit of love came with conditions where I learned I was the one who didn't fit the standard. My family, the Blackwoods, was the kind of family neighbors called quintessential middle-class American. My father, Jonathan Blackwood, was a financial analyst. Gentle, calm, he always quietly stepped back behind my mother, both literally and figuratively. My mother, Victoria, was the true center of the household. A brilliant, sharp woman, a distinguished graduate of Brown University. She was always impeccably dressed, spoke with authority, and believed life was a competition where only the right people won. My older brother Eric was an honor student captain of the football team and eventually a business student at Wharton. My mother called him the pride of the Blackwood family. And me, I was something off-standard. I wasn't as good at socializing as him. I didn't like sports. I didn't have many friends. But when I was 12, a small event changed everything. My grandmother, my father's mother, gave me her old computer. That laptop was slow, its screen scratched a few keys missing. But to me, it was a gateway to the universe. I started tinkering from simple HTML lines to my first Python scripts. While my friends were obsessed with Harry Potter, I was hooked on GitHub. While others dreamed of becoming singers, I dreamed of building software. My mother didn't like it. She called it a waste of time, a useless hobby that would lead nowhere. I didn't argue, but I kept going. Every night after dinner when my mother went to work, my father retreated to read and Eric went to practice football. I opened my laptop and immersed myself in lines of code, as if they were a private language that helped me survive in a world where I always felt out of place. My father didn't say much, but I believed he understood. Once he left a cup of hot cocoa on my desk when I stayed up late with my laptop. No words, but enough to let me know that at least someone in this house saw me. But for my mother, none of my achievements were ever enough. When I won second place in a state-level coding competition, she said, "First place is what matters." When I got an A in advanced math, she asked, why not an A+. Satisfaction never appeared in her eyes when she looked at me. Every dinner was a mini interrogation. She asked about grades, extracurriculars, future plans. She never asked if I was okay, if I was happy. Only if I was stable, on the right track, useful. I remember my 16th birthday. I had just finished a small app to help students create flashcards from notes. Nearly 300 classmates had downloaded it. I proudly shared it at dinner. My father smiled, asked a few gentle questions. Eric shrugged. Not bad. My mother looked at me and asked, "Is this why you got a B+ in physics?" I didn't respond. When the birthday cake was brought out near 10 p.m., the candle burned without anyone singing, and I made a silent wish. One day I'll do something so great she can't ignore it. Those heavy years shaped who I became later. The girl who left home that night, clutching a cheap suitcase without tears, only determination. And if you think the story ends there, you're wrong. Have you ever felt that your greatest joy became the reason for your first fight with the person who gave you life? I did. I was 18 that year. The acceptance letter from UCLA arrived one March morning, with snow still blanketing the porch. I remember my heart racing as my trembling hands tore open the familiar ivory envelope. The bolded words appeared like a dream come true. "Congratulations, you have been accepted into the computer science program at the University of California, Los Angeles." I screamed. My father, mid-sip of his morning coffee, looked up alarmed. "What's wrong, kiddo?" I thrust the letter at him, grinning ear to ear. "I got in Dad UCLA full scholarship." He read it, his eyes softening. "That's incredible, Isabel. Truly incredible." My mother stepped out from the kitchen, hands still dusted with flour. "What's all the noise about?" I handed her the letter, hoping this time she'd be proud. She scanned it quickly, folded it neatly, and placed it on the table as if it were a utility bill. What about Wharton? I froze. I turned down Wharton. I applied to UCLA because it's the best for what I want to study. She raised an eyebrow, her voice firm. What you want is one thing, but the right path is another. I want to study tech, Mom, not finance. She crossed her arms. Blackwoods don't become computer technicians, Isabel. You're capable of more than sitting in a dark office typing code all day with aimless students. My father set his coffee cup down, clearing his throat. Honey, she just got a full scholarship. I know she cut him off, her eyes locked on me, and I also know what's best for her. I took a deep breath. For the first time, I decided not to back down. Mom, I'm not living to fulfill your unfinished dreams. The air froze. My mother stiffened for a few seconds. Then she said low and sharp as a blade, "Say that again." My father tried to intervene, Victoria, enough. But I didn't take it back. For the first time, I felt bigger than my fear of her anger. You always say I'm not enough. You always want me to be like Eric. But I'm me, not anyone's copy. Silence, a thick, dangerous kind of silence. She pulled off her apron, her voice steady. If you've decided to live your own life, don't expect me to take care of you anymore. All the money I saved for your tuition, forget it. You've chosen your own path, so walk it yourself. I nodded. The emotion inside me wasn't anger. It was pain. Pain so deep it numbed everything else. The next day, I quietly went upstairs and packed. I didn't cry. I didn't apologize. I left a single note for my father. I'll be okay. Thank you for believing in me. I walked out of that gray house for the first time without looking back. I rented a small room near downtown, worked nights at a bookstore, and tutored math and physics for middle schoolers on weekends. With UCLA's full scholarship, I could live frugally until school started. I still remember that first night alone in that room. Peeling walls, frayed curtains, a creaky bed. I turned on my old laptop, typed a few lines of code, just to prove to myself I was still okay. In the months that followed, I prepared for my new journey. I read every freshman guide, watched videos about UCLA's campus, learned to cook, do laundry, and budget. No one saw me off at the airport when I left for California. But I didn't need them to. That silence became the fuel I carried with me. Los Angeles greeted me with golden sunlight, thick traffic, and an overwhelming sense of vastness. Everything here was too big, too fast, too unfamiliar. But I wasn't afraid. For the first time, I didn't need anyone's permission to be myself. I rented a dorm room, started intro programming classes with new friends from across the country. In class, I met Adrian Wright, who would later become my co-founder at ShieldKey. But that's a story for the next chapter. For now, all I knew was this: I had stepped out from under my mother's shadow. Each day, I coded, studied, worked, and planned. I knew this path wouldn't be easy, but at least it was mine. The big question still lingered in my mind. Did my mother ever wonder who she could have been if she hadn't lived for others' expectations? I couldn't change her, but I could stop letting her decide who I was. I never forgot the feeling of seeing the notification account locked due to suspicious activity on FoodSaver's admin page, my first startup. In an instant, the sleepless nights, the lines of code I painstakingly wrote under dim yellow light, and the fragile hope of my first entrepreneurial venture, all crumbled with a single click. But to understand why that moment hurt so much, you have to go back to a late autumn afternoon in my freshman year, the day I met Adrian Wright. UCLA in my new student eyes felt like a mini-city. Sprawling campus, grand academic buildings, students from all over the world. In my object-oriented programming class, I usually sat near the back quiet. I wasn't good at small talk, and most of my time was spent taking notes and staying silent. Adrian was the opposite. He walked into class with a perpetually disheveled look backpack slung over one shoulder. Long hair, loosely tied back AirPods in, but never playing music. We became friends because of a syntax error. In week 3, when the class was assigned our first group project, Adrian showed up late. The other group member had already switched teams. I was the only one left sitting alone. The professor pointed at him, then at me. "You two won, team." Honestly, I didn't expect much. But Adrian surprised me. Not only did he understand code, but he was also great at design my Achilles heel. On our first day together in the library, he pointed at my user interface and laughed. "This looks like an ATM screen from 2001. Let me fix it, okay?" From then on, we clicked naturally. We studied together, coded together, ate cold pizza in the dorms when deadlines loomed. Adrian had this unique energy, as if failure wasn't something to fear, but a necessary part of the learning journey. He was the one who suggested the idea for Food Saver. "Don't you see," he said as we sat in a cafe near campus, "this place throws out so many perfectly good sandwiches every day. Meanwhile, students like us are surviving on instant noodles." I nodded. I was used to scraping by. The scholarship only covered tuition, so I worked constantly. "So why don't we make an AP?" He continued to connect students with eateries around campus. They can notify when they're about to close and have leftover food. Students can pre-order and pick it up. I sat up. Genius. Food Saver was born from a napkin scribble and a promise, even if no one invested, we'd still try. Throughout our sophomore year, we poured ourselves into building it. I handled the back end, Adrian designed the interface, and another friend studying marketing helped with outreach. We emailed every eatery around campus. Some said no, some laughed, but a few agreed to try. When we got the first notification from the app user placed an order at Cafe Milo, I nearly cried. It worked. It actually worked. We had 312 users in 3 months. Small, but it was the first fruit of 2 students with no one backing them. But then, everything came crashing down. One day, the app's main server was attacked. User accounts were accessed illegally. The data, though not financial, was still compromised. We were reported. Google Play removed the app. The server froze. Partners pulled out. We lost everything in a week. I sat in front of my computer all night trying to find the error, trying to recover the data, but every effort was too late. When I video called home, I didn't expect my mother to understand. I just wanted to hear something that wasn't blame. She listened, then sighed. "You don't know business, Isabel. People make apps to make money. And this was just a pipe dream from the start. This is an expensive lesson. Don't fight reality." I didn't respond, because if I opened my mouth, I would have cried. Not because of the app's failure, but because I lost faith from the person who should have believed in me most. Have you ever experienced your first big failure? Not flunking a test, but the kind that makes you doubt yourself entirely. If so, share with me. Truly, you're not alone. After that fall, I went quiet. It took nearly a semester to recover. Adrian stayed by my side, not saying much, just sending me small snippets of code or old memes to make me laugh. He didn't blame me, didn't leave, didn't give up. One day he said we'll look back and be grateful for that stupid app. I didn't believe him then. But today, writing these words, I'm grateful. Without Food Saver, I wouldn't have learned the most important lesson: technology can't save anyone without a solid foundation. And big dreams need more than good intentions and ideas. They need resilience. By the end of junior year, I started tinkering with a new idea, this time about personal data security. But that is another chapter. Because before ShieldKey was born, I had to learn to rise from the rubble. And that rise would change my life in ways I never imagined. That night, washing dishes in the cramped kitchen of my rented Westwood apartment, I heard the window rattle with each gust of cold wind. On the counter, my laptop was still running its dim blue light, casting shadows on the peeling wall. On the screen, a clear message: encryption, success, 100%. ShieldKey, the first line of code, was alive. I stood still for a few seconds, almost not believing my eyes. My body was exhausted a shift at the IT support desk until after 6 p.m. evening classes, and now it was 1 a.m., but those stable lines of code were like a shot of mental caffeine. I opened the window, breathing deeply, the damp, rainy air. I had created something, not to make waves, not to raise millions, but to truly help people who needed a tool to protect their data. ShieldKey was born from anger. Anger at the indifference of big platforms toward user data. Anger that small businesses couldn't afford professional security services. And anger at myself for once giving up on an idea because I feared failing again. But this time I would see it through. Adrian was the first person I shared the idea with. He was munching on the last bite of a sandwich, nodding. Data security for small businesses, solid, as long as it's not Food Saver 2.0. I glared. "You design the interface okay, I'll handle the back-end encryption." He raised an eyebrow but grinned. "My dorm's been boring lately. I'm in. But one condition." I braced myself. "What?" "This time we go all the way. Not a class project, not a test. A real company." I paused for a few seconds, then extended my hand. "Co-founder." He shook it. "Co-founder. If you've ever had a friend who not only believed in you, but jumped headfirst into something that seemed impossible, tell me about it. I believe those quiet friendships are the foundation of so many great things." We set up desks facing each other in the rented apartment. By day, I studied and worked. Adrian freelanced as a designer to cover rent. At night, the tiny kitchen became Mission Control instant noodles coffee and hundreds of post-it notes on the walls. I rewrote the encryption structure from scratch with a clear goal. Small businesses without IT teams could use ShieldKey to encrypt emails files and customer data with just a few clicks. Adrian designed a simple, user-friendly interface, so intuitive even my grandmother could use it. I still remember writing the first project description ShieldKey. Protect your data, no expertise required. It wasn't flashy, but it was real. Financial struggles weren't just a challenge, they were the default. We ate canned food, borrowed old monitors from the university library, and shared a thrift store desk. Some days I stayed up all night and went straight to class without changing. Some weeks Adrian had to borrow money from his parents, something he hated doing. But in return, ShieldKey grew one step at a time, from the main interface to the encryption algorithm, from the first logo hand drawn by Adrian with a pencil, to buying the domain shieldkey.io for $2.99 during a sale. One night, watching him passed out at the desk, I thought, without Adrian, I probably would have given up again. Not just because he was talented, but because he believed I could do it. One Saturday afternoon, while testing the beta version, something small happened that I'll never forget. A small-scale flower vendor from the weekend market, her name was Rosa, emailed our support address. I don't understand tech, but this app makes me feel safe. We looked at each other. Neither said a word. But in Adrian's eyes, I saw what I'd always wanted, recognition not from my mother, not from investors, but from a real person we'd actually helped. We officially registered ShieldKey as an LLC in May, right after my final exams. With just $150, we had a company, no office, no employees, just 2 students and a stubborn dream. The world might not have known ShieldKey yet, but we did. And more importantly, we believed in it. I once thought ShieldKey would stay small, a few hundred users, a few thank yous. But I was wrong. And you know the best part. The twist came from the person I thought had left me forever. Stay tuned. I returned home after 4 years of studying and working in Los Angeles. Not to apologize. Not to ask for anything. I just thought I should share a little, even just a bit, about what I was doing. About ShieldKey. About the first company Adrian and I had built, legally registered with real users, real products, and a clear goal to help small businesses protect their data without spending thousands on big solutions. I didn't expect my mother to be thrilled, but I hoped at least she'd listen. We had dinner in the familiar old kitchen. Not much had changed, the yellow bulb still flickered slightly. The wooden table still bore the scratch from Eric in 7th grade. My father sat across from me, quiet as always. My mother brought out her favorite beef stew. I sat down and spoke first. I'm working on a project with a classmate. We've launched a beta version. Over 600 users already. It's a data security app. She nodded lightly. What kind of app? For small businesses. To encrypt data customer files emails. But it's simple, easy to use. I handle the encryption and platform structure. My friend Adrian does the interface. She set her spoon down, exhaling as if she'd just heard an absurd story. You're saying you're sitting in a rented apartment writing software with no company, no partners, no revenue, and calling it a career. I kept my voice calm. Our company is a registered LLC. We have a domain, a website, real users. We plan to raise funding next year. She laughed. Not quite mocking, but full of condescension. A startup game. Thousands of kids make apps like you every year. 998 fail. The other 2 survive because of their parents' money. I felt the blood rush to my face, but I stayed calm. I'm not asking anyone for money. I built this from scratch. I just wanted to share with my family. Share for what she tilted her head. You think I'll clap and cheer, Isabel? You turned down Wharton. You rejected a clear path. To chase childish dreams. Technology, coding. Don't you find it laughable? I looked at her. For the first time, not with fear or anger, but with regret. No, Mom. I don't find it laughable, but I do feel sad. Sad about what she snapped. Sad that you never cared about what I love. Never asked why I chose this path. Sad that I have to explain myself to you, like you're an investor looking for reasons to say no. She stood up. Enough. Stop acting. If you think you're so great, handle it yourself. Get out of my house. And don't ever come back. My father tried to say something, but she raised her hand. Jonathan, don't defend her. She wants to be an adult. Let her live like one. I stood up. My hands trembled slightly, but my voice didn't. I don't need anyone to defend me, but I hoped just once you'd choose to be a mother instead of a judge. I went upstairs, packed my things. Everything fit into a rolling suitcase and an old backpack. No one saw me out. No hugs. No good wishes. Just the sound of the wooden door closing behind me. That was the last time I slept in that house. Have you ever been hurt by the very family you tried so hard to please? If so, leave a comment. Not to complain. But to see this pain has a name, and you're not alone. I took a bus back to Los Angeles that night. On the way, I didn't sleep. I just stared out the window, watching the highway lights blur by. One thought swirled in my mind, so all ties are cut. But then a strange feeling rose in me, relief. I no longer needed to try to please my mother. No need to explain, justify, or beg for acceptance. From now on, I had the full right to fail, and the full right to succeed. It was a new beginning. No one to defend me, but no one to control me either. And what I didn't know then was that stepping out into that night would lead me to a turning point bigger than I could have imagined, a funding round a mysterious investor and a truth I never dared to consider. Have you ever started over from less than zero, not zero, but negative, where you lose even a place to return to your trust, drained your self-worth hanging by a fragile thread? I started from there on an autumn night in Los Angeles 3 years ago. Dragging an old suitcase throat dry from a silent night on an interstate bus, I stood at Adrian's door, the last person I had the courage to text. When the door opened, Adrian didn't ask anything. He just stepped aside and said, "Come in." The tiny apartment wasn't big enough for two, but somehow we made it work. I slept on an old sofa he kept his room. We split everything electricity, food, coding time. Shield key, once just a glimmering idea in the night, became the center of our lives. Every morning I woke at 6 a.m., jogged around a nearby park, not because I loved exercise, but because I needed something to remind myself I'm still alive, still breathing. Then a simple breakfast cereal toast, instant coffee. Then work, all day. No emails, no Silicon Valley-style meetings. Just code test, debug, repeat. Adrian handled the user interface visuals and customer experience. I took care of the system security and operations. We knew Shield Key couldn't compete with flashiness, so it had to win with reliability. But no one tells you before you start a company. You'll hear no more than at any other time in your life. We began sending applications to startup funds accelerators and student tech conferences. The first rejection came in 12 hours. Good idea, but not commercially viable. The second was blunt, no market potential. I read and reread every email, underlining lines like a student trying to understand why they got a bad grade. Adrian laughed it off. "I got rejected 17 times for internships. You're still counting." "Yes," I said. "I'm at number 12. But each rejection made me rewrite the pitch deck, redo the financial model, even rewrite the app's core to prove we were worth investing in. That night, when the 15th fund rejected us with, "We prioritize startups with experienced founding teams," I laughed. What experience is greater than surviving being kicked out by your own mother? Have you ever been rejected so much you doubted both yourself and your dreams? If so, leave a comment. I know you understand the feeling of standing on a foggy path with no signs, no guide, moving forward on instinct alone. Then one day everything changed quietly because of an email from a name I'd never heard, Patricia Lawson. "Dear Isabel and Adrian, I read your Medium post. The idea has depth. I'd like to meet via Zoom Friday, 4 p.m. I stared at Adrian, bewildered. "I don't even know who she is." "Search," he said, and within 2 minutes we were staring at Google. Patricia Lawson, founder of a small venture capital firm, Westward Ventures, specializing in non-traditional founders. That call was short, but profound. Patricia didn't ask about financial models or user numbers. She asked, "What made you start this idea?" I answered honestly, from helplessness. Seeing friends, freelancers, small vendors lose data because they couldn't afford security. And from our own past failure. She nodded. "I invest in people, not numbers. I'll write a $50,000 check for 5% equity." I was stunned. Months of rejections, and the one person who said yes didn't even ask for an Excel sheet. Adrian frowned. "Any other conditions?" "Just one," she said. "Don't give up even when I'm not here to remind you." That first investment, small compared to typical funding rounds, was our lifeline. We used it to hire a maintenance programmer, buy a dedicated server, and launch Shield Key's official version. But perhaps the biggest thing Patricia gave us wasn't the money. It was the feeling someone saw us. Truly saw us. I sent a nearly 500-word thank you email. She replied with one sentence, "I was once a girl no one believed in. Now I just do what I wish someone had done for me back then." From that investment, Shield Key gained a small foothold in the startup community. A few tech blogs wrote about us. A few beta users sent thank you emails. Not explosive, not viral, but steady, step by step. And I, the girl who once stood outside her family's door, began stepping through a door I opened myself. In the next chapter, I'll tell you about the biggest twist when an anonymous investment appeared in our Series A round. And the truth behind it left me speechless. Trust me, you won't guess who it was. But when you know, you'll understand some love is only spoken through silent actions. And sometimes forgiveness begins with things no one sees. I've grown used to walking, falling, and getting back up on my own. After years of no one catching me, you learn not to expect what doesn't come. And I thought I was strong enough not to be shaken by anything anymore. Until the name Jonathan Blackwood appeared in an internal email. I was in Shield Key's temporary office, really, just a rented loft, in an old Culver City building. That afternoon, the team was reviewing the cap table list of shareholders to prepare for the Series A funding announcement. Everyone was excited Shield Key had secured $1.2 million from 3 investors. But what caught my eye was a strange $500,000 contribution through a fund called Bluestone Capital. No one here pitched to them, Adrian said as we went through the names. Yeah, and there's no founder's note from them. Usually investors like this would ask for a repitch or interview. I replied confused. Adrian shrugged. Maybe they're just silent investors. It's not uncommon. I nodded, but something felt off. I opened the fund's internal email publicly shared for legal audits, and in the CC line of an internal memo from Bluestone to their legal rep, I saw it, Jonathan Blackwood. No mistake. Name, email, digital signature. My father. My heart pounded. I felt a chill, like someone had poured a bucket of ice water over my chest. It wasn't joy. It was a mix of emotions I couldn't name, doubt, anger, gratitude, and pain. I stood up, grabbed my phone, and stepped out of the small meeting room. The Los Angeles afternoon was sunny, but I felt nothing but a tightening in my chest. I opened my contacts, scrolled to my father's name. My finger hovered over the call button, then stopped. I didn't know what I'd say. Why did you invest? Why didn't you say anything? Or maybe, do you think this makes it okay? I didn't call. I just stood there. My emotions clashed fiercely. Part of me was touched after everything someone was quietly watching over me. But another part felt humiliated. Was this pity, a way to make amends? That night I wrote a short email. Dear Dad, I know the Bluestone investment came from you. I don't know whether to thank you or be angry. But I need to know, why didn't you say anything, Isabel? I didn't send it. I saved it as a draft, read it, deleted it, wrote it again, deleted it again. Finally, I shut my laptop. 3 days later, when Shield Key officially announced the funding round, my father sent a text, one line cold, but real. I trust you know what you're doing. Keep going. I read it dozens of times. No apology, no explanation. No, I'm proud of you. Just a short, almost bureaucratic sentence. But strangely, it made me cry in the office in front of my screen amid open browser tabs, because I knew that was all my father could give in his own way. With my mother, love was expectations, control, and commands. But with my father, love was always quiet, reserved, unshowy. I'd once resented him for not protecting me, for not speaking up when my mother kicked me out. But now I understood perhaps he'd chosen his own way to stay in my life, by quietly supporting me without needing anyone to know. I don't know if I've forgiven him yet. Maybe not. Maybe it'll take a while. But for the first time in years, I opened an old photo of me standing between my parents at my high school graduation. And I no longer felt a sting when I looked into his eyes. Maybe forgiveness starts there, not with a hug, not with an apology, but with letting go of anger, letting go of needing a clear explanation. A week later, TechWatch called Shield Key the startup for everyday people's security. The press asked about our investors. I just smiled. They're people who believed in us enough not to need us to prove it again. We began preparing to scale. Shield Key now had over 5,000 users, mostly small merchants, freelancers, and independent teachers, people often overlooked by big cybersecurity solutions. In a weekend meeting, Adrian looked at me and asked, "You okay with that investment?" I nodded. Not sure if I'm okay, but I'm learning to accept things that aren't perfect and make them part of me. Because in the end, life doesn't give us perfect relationships, but it gives us a chance to start over with understanding, not resentment. I thought I'd cry when I signed the final contract. I'd imagined that moment hundreds of times, the moment my name once mocked, as the dreamy girl officially became the co-founder of a company acquired for $75 million. I thought there'd be tears, cheers, champagne corks popping, and me drunk on victory. But what happened was the opposite. I signed, set the pen down, sat still, and just breathed slowly. No one tells you that your greatest success can leave you feeling empty. By March that year, ShieldKey had surpassed 15,000 customers, mostly small businesses, private doctors, tutors, content creators, all people who didn't know how to securely store their personal data. We never advertised aggressively, but an article from Privacy Watch, a niche tech security outlet, changed everything. They called ShieldKey the simplest, most transparent, and pragmatic security solution of 20xx's. After that, emails flooded in, partnership requests, investment offers, speaking invitations. But the biggest surprise was an offer from Privacy Guard, a leading security company looking to expand into the lower-end market. They didn't negotiate much. 1 email, 3 meetings, then the acquisition deal, $75 million for the entire system brand and customer data, with the condition that the original tech team stay on as consultants for 6 months. Adrian and I spent a night debating. He asked, "You sure this is our baby?" I looked at him. "I don't think we're selling our child. I think we're giving it a bigger chance to grow." So we signed. ShieldKey, once written in code on a creaky laptop, became part of a global system. I took home $32 million after taxes and equity. Adrian got about $18 million. The later team members, programmers, advisors, legal, were also fairly compensated per our agreement. A few weeks later, I bought a $25 million villa in Malibu, not to show off, but because I needed a space no one had walked through, no one had placed expectations on me. No mother, no father, no old friends, no memories. The house sits on a hill overlooking the Pacific. Floor-to-ceiling glass oak kitchen, private library, a small office with a direct ocean view. I paid in cash. No mortgage, no approval needed. As simple as clicking checkout. On move-in day, I stood on the balcony watching the sunset. The ocean far below shifted from gray velvet to glowing orange. I thought I did it, but strangely, I didn't feel as happy as I'd imagined. I thought winning would erase all my pain, the rejections, my mother's taunts the night I left Denver with no one to say goodbye. But it didn't vanish. It just receded, making room for a new question. Now what? I tried everything to fill that void, traveling, meeting investors, learning to paint, bake, meditate. But the only thing that made me feel lighter was answering emails from old customers, people still thanking ShieldKey even though it was no longer mine. A single mother wrote thanks to ShieldKey. I securely stored all my daughter's school application documents. No more losses. Thank you. A high school teacher from Kansas said I don't get tech, but your app helps me sleep better knowing my data isn't exposed. Those simple words, once overlooked, were now the only thing that made me feel I'd lived meaningfully. I didn't need fame. I didn't need to be on magazine covers. I just needed to know that what I created, every line of code I wrote, made someone's life a little easier. One evening, standing in my kitchen looking out at the sea, I reopened an old folder called New Ideas. It had been 3 months since selling ShieldKey. Inside were dozens of drafts, ideas for an app to help parents manage kids' online safety, a system for seniors' data security. I smiled. Maybe I can't stay still for long. Because I realized what makes me happy was never my bank balance. It was the feeling of creating something useful and true to myself. That same night I got a call. An unknown number. The caller said, "Hello, I'm the lawyer for Mr. Jonathan Blackwood. I'm calling about a matter you might want to know about sooner rather than later." My heart tightened. Once again, the past knocked quietly but persistently. I learned my father was facing prosecution from a stranger's voice on the phone. "Are you Isabel Blackwood? I'm the attorney representing Mr. Jonathan Blackwood. We need to meet." I was sitting by my office window watching the Malibu sea shift slowly from gray-blue to pink-purple as dusk fell. I'd grown used to hearing my father's name as something distant, like a closed chapter in my life. But this time that chapter was being smudged. Jonathan Blackwood, once a respected figure in Denver's local finance scene, was facing a serious charge accounting fraud and misuse of individual investors' funds. The complaint came from a former close associate. Local papers ran sensational headlines, model father, turns out to be a betrayer of trust. I read that line on my phone while waiting for my morning coffee. My hands shook, not because my father was perfect, but because I knew despite everything he wasn't heartless. I called the lawyer back. After a brief introduction, he said plainly, "We're not asking you to testify in his defense, but we believe your voice, if you choose to speak, could soften the public's aggression." I stayed silent. I thought of that night when I was 17, when my mother kicked me out, and my father said nothing. I thought of the $500,000 he quietly invested in Shield Key through a fund without a word of explanation. Did I owe him anything? No, I didn't. But I understood one thing. Forgiveness isn't a gift you give someone else. It's a gift you give yourself to live without carrying the heavy stone of resentment. I opened my laptop, wrote a letter. I am Isabel Blackwood, daughter of Jonathan Blackwood. I'm not writing to excuse any legal missteps he may have made. I believe in the law, but I'm also someone who's had conflicts with my father, to the point we didn't speak for years. I know he's not perfect, but I also know in the most critical moments of my life, he chose to support me quietly and without conditions. The truth isn't as simple as a sensational headline, and a person shouldn't be defined solely by one mistake. If my father is at fault, he'll take responsibility. But if we demand justice, let's also demand fairness in how we treat a person's dignity and life's work. I'm not defending him. I'm only asking to distinguish between a mistake and a person's character. I didn't sign it as Shield Key co-founder. I just wrote, Isabel Blackwood, daughter. I posted the letter on my personal Medium account with a single line. Silence can be a form of forgiveness. But this time I choose to speak. What I didn't expect was the online response. The first comment read, a daughter like this, he must have done something right. The second, I lost my dad to rumors. Thank you for speaking up the right way. The press started shifting no longer, calling my father a fraud, but a veteran entrepreneur facing financial allegations. Daughter speaks out humanely. The investigation lasted 3 months. In the end, there wasn't enough clear evidence. The accuser had been fired for internal violations. Old financial records didn't prove intent to defraud. The case was dropped. My father wasn't fully cleared, but he wasn't convicted either. He retained what was left of his dignity, and I believe that part was no longer something he kept just for himself. One late spring afternoon, I received a handwritten letter from an unfamiliar address. Inside was a short, slightly shaky note. I never expected you to carry anything for me, but thank you for not staying silent like I did back then. Jay. I read it over and over until the creases wore thin, and for the first time I felt light, as if something in me stopped waiting for an apology, because not every wound needs to be stitched with words. Some only need a direct look, no avoidance, and a small action, proving I understand. And I'm changing. I used to tell myself that if my mother ever reached out again, I wouldn't pick up. I'd imagined seeing her name Victoria Blackwood on my phone and smiling, brushing it off like dust from the past. I thought I was strong enough not to need the voice that once shattered me, but when it actually happened, I froze. No smile. No brushing it off. Just silence, my heart pounding like it was knocking on my own door. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. I was gardening behind my house, a new hobby I picked up in the quiet mornings and late afternoons of Malibu. The screen showed her name, Mom. Old number. I hadn't saved it, but I knew. I tapped answer, said nothing. Her voice, as if weathered by a long wind, was dry and slow. Isabel. It's Mom. I know it's been a while. I'm not asking for anything. I just want to know if you're okay. I still didn't speak. Just breathed softly. She continued quieter. If you'll allow it, I'd like to see you once. Not to rehash the past. Just to see you. I didn't nod, didn't refuse. I only asked when. We met at a small restaurant in West Los Angeles, a place I chose not too fancy, not too central. Just private enough. I arrived 10 minutes early. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. My mother, once sharp and pristine as a cold blade, now had silver streaks at her temples. Dark circles under her eyes, her steps slow. She sat down carefully as if touching a memory that might break. We ordered food. The dinner passed with small talk. You still live in Malibu? Yeah. You still doing tech, taking a break, to breathe. We didn't mention Denver. Didn't mention the night when I was 17. Didn't mention the words, get out of my house. I think she remembered it clearly. But we both knew some things when brought up don't heal, but only reopen a closing wound. After the main course, she hesitated. I'm not apologizing. Because saying it now, it'd feel too late. And unworthy. I set my fork down, looked at her. She continued. I just want you to know. I read your letter about your dad. I cried. Not because you defended him, but because you still had the heart to write those words. I didn't respond. Just smiled faintly. A smile neither forgiving nor accusing. Just the smile of someone who'd learned to let go of expecting others to change when I needed them to. I said I'm doing fine, Mom. She looked at me for a long time, then nodded. That's enough for me. People have asked me, why meet her again? Why not wait for a formal apology? I think, when we're young, we imagine justice comes when those who hurt us bow their heads and admit fault. But as I've grown, I've realized forgiveness isn't about giving them relief. It's about giving yourself the right to move forward without dragging heavy resentment. I didn't need her to say sorry, because words without action and empathy are just empty sounds. I didn't need her approval either, because I'd learned to validate my own worth without my mother, without the past, nodding in agreement. That night leaving the restaurant, she didn't hug me. I didn't walk her to her car. We just stood facing each other saying goodbye with our eyes. She said, "If you ever need anything, I'm still at the old number." I nodded. No promises, no refusals. Back home, I opened the balcony door, sat alone under the stars. The night sea wasn't too loud, just a soft murmur like a wordless song. I realized I wasn't sad anymore, wasn't angry. I just felt at peace. Forgiveness doesn't start with words. It starts with acceptance that the past happened, and you won't let it chain your future. Blackwood Foundation is my new brainchild, born not for fame or duty, but because I felt it was time to live, not just for myself. We founded the nonprofit a year after Shield Key was sold. The goal was clear: provide financial support skills and career connections for girls passionate about tech, but lacking resources, especially those from single-parent homes, minority backgrounds, or families where no one had gone to college. The initial team was just Thrima Julia, a former UCLA IT lecturer, and Kevin, a veteran Google mentor. We didn't chase big funding or flashy campaigns. We visited small high schools, held career workshops, talked directly with students. At first, only 5 girls joined, then 10, then 25. This year, Blackwood Foundation awarded over 100 scholarships, not just tuition, but a long-term journey, personal mentors, soft skills training, summer internships, and most importantly, the belief that they are worthy. Belief, the thing I once lacked so much I had to fight to prove my value even when no one asked. I don't say this to the girls. I just tell them I was kicked out of my home for not choosing the dream my mother wanted. I tell them I failed with my first startup, slept on a friend's sofa. And I tell them from the lowest point, Shield Key was born. It's not a lecture, it's a message. You don't need anyone's approval to start. You just need to believe you have the right to try. I'll never forget that afternoon at the scholarship ceremony. After the awards, a student named Sophia, daughter of a plumber and a single immigrant mother, stepped onto the stage. She wore a simple green dress, hair tied high, eyes shining. She said, "When I got the scholarship email, I thought it was spam. I didn't believe I had value. But you said something in the workshop I'll never forget. You don't need to fit a mold, you just need to be true to yourself." And today, I'm standing here because I believed those words. I choked up. Not just from emotion, but because I understood finally I'd done what I wished someone had done for me at 18, believed in a girl who didn't fit the mold. That evening I went home, poured a glass of wine, sat on the porch, looking at the dark sea. The waves rolled as always, but my heart stirred in a strange way. Not pain, but a new kind of peace. The peace of knowing I was living meaningfully, not to prove, but to give back. Success, I think, was never just a bank balance or a seaside villa. Success is when you carve a path no one has walked before, then bend down offering a hand to the next person. People have asked me if you could do it over, would you change anything? My answer is no. Because without falling, without loneliness, without being kicked out or rejected, today's Isabel wouldn't know how to listen. How to touch the heart of a Sophia sitting quietly at the back of a classroom. A few days ago, cleaning my office, I opened an old memory box where I keep a few things from my childhood. Among them was a note in my grandmother's shaky handwriting. Success isn't about being recognized. Success is proving you were right to believe in yourself. I read those words over and over until I knew them by heart. My grandmother, the one who gave me that old computer, who said, "You don't need to be like anyone else, though." Long gone, her words still whisper in the wind, gentle but firm. I wonder if she were alive. Would she be proud knowing her granddaughter, once fumbling between lines of code, now created a scholarship fund in her name? Built a company that helped tens of thousands protect their private data. But then I realized I don't need her nod, because I've learned to nod to myself, and that's the hardest part. People think forgiveness is an act, a word, a hug, a handshake. But to me, forgiveness is a state. It's when you look at an old wound without wincing, when you say a name that once made you cry without stinging eyes, I've forgiven my mother not because she apologized, but because I don't want to live another day in anger. I've forgiven my father not because he made up for everything, but because he loved me in the way he knew how. And maybe that's enough. I've forgiven myself for being weak, for rebelling, for wanting to give up, for the days I didn't love myself, didn't believe I was worthy. And I ask you, have you ever forgiven yourself? If not, could today be the day to start? Leave a comment if you're in the middle of that journey. Maybe your courage will be a light for someone else. I no longer chase stages, no longer feel the need to prove anything. My life now is simpler mornings with tea, tending a small garden, writing a few blog lines, mentoring students afternoons, listening to the waves. I still work, but not for money. I still dream, but without rushing. I still remember, but without regret. Nothing is perfect, but I don't need perfection anymore. Because in the end, I've learned a life's worth isn't in how many clap when you step up, but in how many times you stand up, wipe your own tears, and keep going with no one by your side. I stand there in the morning breeze looking at the sea. No longer the girl kicked out at 17. No longer the student desperate to prove she's enough. I am me, Isabel, who broke but didn't fall, who walked but didn't leave her heart behind. Looking back on this entire journey, I don't see a story of startups or money. I see a journey of healing. A journey of a girl once rejected, once failed, carrying nameless wounds, but choosing not to let the past define her. My story isn't to inspire, but to remind every one of us can stand up, can forgive, can rebuild a life from the place we thought had nothing left. I know someone out there is wondering, can I wrote this story as a nod? Yes, you can. If my journey touched something in you, leave a comment. I always read them. And if you want to keep following stories full of raw emotion and truth like this, don't forget to follow the channel. We don't need to be perfect. We just need to be real with ourselves. And that's already a beautiful start.